In fact, it's less than 100 days to go for US elections, and the race is now neck to neck, with some polls giving Kamala Harris a slim lead over Donald Trump. To discuss this next phase of the US elections and what happens as far as Team Harris's agenda going forward is concerned, I'm joined by Rick Rossow, Senior Advisor at CSIS, joining us live on NDTV. Thanks much, Rick, for joining us on this program. My first question to you is that as we talk about what lies ahead in terms of the specifics of this case, what does it mean as far as Team Harris's agenda for India is concerned?
Yeah, it is a bit of a black box. Despite Kamala Harris having Indian heritage, she's never really kind of embraced a powerful leadership role in the administration or time on Senate, occasionally voicing, because, of course, she has that nuance and understanding of India better than what you'd see from a lot of candidates, but never really embraced it and wrapped herself up as trying to be a leader in Washington on that topic. And as governor of Minnesota, Governor Walz, of course, very, very similar, not really a lot of opportunities. So I think a lot of what you're going to see from a Harris administration, should that come to pass, is going to be defined a little bit more by the candidates they choose for different cabinet roles, for the National Security Council, things like that. I think those are the people that day to day are really going to choose the direction and tenure in terms of what we're doing with India in the coming years, should there be a Harris administration. And I think under that, I think it's easy to kind of expect that we'd see basically a bit of a status quo. I think they'll probably take over a lot of the ideas and initiatives from the Biden administration, meaning that relatively positive on trade, very forward-leaning on defense and security, but still occasionally bringing up concerns about human rights and things like that. So I think that's probably the status quo we can kind of understand, but some of it will be driven by individual personalities that get appointed into the administration.
It's a bit of a black box as far as what Kamala Harris will come up with. But a lot of people say it's actually honeymoon period for Kamala Harris right now, early days into the campaign, but it may end soon. And then what she's looking at is probably a competition that's going down to the wires. Do you think it's going to be a stiff election?
Yeah, you've always got a bit of a bump when you have somebody new that doesn't have, quite the same long governance track record. With Biden, it's easy to point to a few victories, but a lot of areas where maybe they fell short of people's expectations. So as we've seen, incumbent presidents tend to have relatively low ratings when it comes to re-election time, even though, several candidates have actually won re-election in recent years, not Trump, but the previous presidents. So, you get a bit of a bump when you have a new candidate, when you have a new vice presidential candidate. You can expect that to fade to some extent. But, we still have a relatively long road ahead, plenty of opportunities for both candidates to say things that could help or harm if they ever do figure out an opportunity to get together for a debate. I mean, just look, we've had, one presidential debate, and that changed dramatically the course of the election. So I do think that, status quo, there's an opportunity, I think, to lose a bit of steam, but a lot of opportunities to regain it and find new areas that are going to actually impact, what we have for the final result. Including, again, if they manage to find an opportunity to debate each other directly on stage.
If one were to compare Team Harris and Team Trump, how do you see them on some of the important priorities and focus areas when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to India?
Well, I think, a Trump administration, you would expect, as we saw before, to be a lot more focused on domestic constituents. Not to say that, a Harris administration wouldn't, because, first and foremost, every president is beholden first and foremost to domestic voters. But, with Trump, you saw a very heavy emphasis on that. And some of these, very tense issues that we see right now on concerns about globalization. Are we encouraging companies to go overseas when we should be creating jobs locally? Concerns about migration, illegal migration across the border, about involvement in foreign wars. That's where you actually see that really strong domestic focus begins to intervene in some of the global issues where the United States has traditionally shown a leadership role on. I think with the Harris administration, it'll be a little more balanced. I think, for instance, supporting Ukraine will remain a primary mission. I think that there'll be some appetite still, like we've seen with India, to encourage companies to consider outbound investments if it's meeting other goals like climate. Climate itself, of course, is another dramatic area we're going to see a big change. The Trump administration was not very comfortable talking about climate change, pulled out of the Paris Accords. Democrats brought us back in. If Trump wins, I think you can expect that we're going to leave again and less leadership from the United States. So on security, I think when it comes to China, there's not a lot of daylight between the two candidates. Maybe a difference on how they speak about it, some of the actions, but not a lot of difference. But on other security matters, on issues like immigration, certainly on trade and on climate, there is where I think you're going to see a lot bigger differences depending on who wins the election.
Richard Rossow, thanks so much for taking out the time and speaking to me on India Sense.